Welcome to Road to Redemption, a show sharing powerful life testimonies, giving hope to those on their own road to redemption.
Welcome to Road to Redemption. This is John Martin, your host. I'm so excited to be with y'all today. I have a friend of mine here that I've been so looking forward to get to come on the show. This is Travis Wilburn. Travis, hello. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, man, it's good to be here.
Yeah, finally. Yeah. I know I've really been wanting to get you in here for a while, and we finally put it together. So grateful for you coming on, Travis. Yeah. And I know you have such a powerful story. So just, if you wouldn't mind, just give us a little background on you and how you got here.
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Walton County, which is very rare for this area, I've come to find out. Born in Freeport, and then have just bounced around Santa Rosa Beach for the last 10 years or so. I was had a great family growing up. I'm one of those, you hear so many stories of just total chaos early on, and that wasn't the case for me. We had a great family, regular churchgoers. We were raised in the Catholic Church, so I look back at pictures, and even at 6 months old or whatever it is when you're a baby, baptized in the Catholic Church, and playing under the pews, when you're 2-3 years old with eating Cheerios. And it's like we were in the church all throughout our childhood. And it was the Catholic Church, it's all that I knew. You go through it, and you learn the prayers, and you go through the rites of passage and the first communions and the confirmations. And I guess what I realized, whenever I finally started going sideways, is that I knew a lot of prayers, but I didn't know Jesus. And that was the reason for the chaos.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've all been through that, and, all believers, all denominations that, as we go through life, it's rare that we just stay on the narrow path. And I know that, you will tell us a little more. How did it go from there?
Well, I guess the story kind of began whenever I got in high school. I was a good kid. I was a good student. I did well in school. And then it seemed like midway through high school is when I just started going sideways, and I think it's because I just didn't have a relationship with God. I knew all the right prayers, but just got in the wrong crowd and cared less about school, cared a lot about partying and drinking, looking at everything imaginable, inappropriate on the internet. And that was my life. And, I have this period of my life. It's basically between the ages of 16 and 25. And I call these my lost years. I'm 32 years old now. And there was a 10-year period there where I was completely lost. I remember every single day, for the most part, between 16 and 25, I would live for the night. You go out, you drink, you party, you do your thing. I barely scraped through the last 2 years of high school even. I did enough to get by. And that's where I was. You live in this cycle of, you basically hate who you are because you drink, you party, you stay out till 4 o'clock, you wake up, you're in a fog, and you're just not a good human being. That's where I was. I had a realization of that even, at 18, 20 years old. Worked at a golf course at the time and didn't show up half the time. And the times that I did, I wasn't doing anything excellent. And that's sort of where I was. I remember always wanting to be a great example for I have my younger brother. I have a brother who's 16 months younger, but constantly failing at that. Like, my parents were so wonderful, and they pushed, Travis, you're to lead him. You're the big brother. Paint a good picture for a vision for his life. Be a good example. And I remember just hating myself because I failed constantly and could never live up to it.
And God was still there. I mean, you obviously knew God because you were in church, and you knew you weren't living right. And so how did you go? How was God working in your life at this point?
Yeah, great question. Whenever I think back to it, I can remember, 2, 3 in the morning, often being just in like a drunken stupor. And it feels crazy to say that at this point, but that's where I was. And feeling the Lord speaking. And what it is he was calling me. You know, even in those moments, God is trying to call us home, but not responding. He calls, but we have to respond. God is he's so wonderful and so patient. He doesn't barge in. He stands at the door and he knocks, and it's up to us to open the door. And so, you know, I had a good foundation. And to highlight 2 things, you know, I'm so grateful that I had a good foundation. My parents laid the groundwork, but I went away from it. And I think it was finally their prayers that broke through whenever I get to the 24, 25. You know, my dad is not a guy who's typically saying, you know, I'm praying for you, you know, at least not yet. But even he said, you know, Travis, at the end there, when you were, you know, 25 years old, he said, lots of sleepless nights. I was praying for you, son. You know,
Wow.
We needed you back,
Man.
you know, and that's where it got to. You know, rock bottom can be a beautiful place, and God often uses that. And that's where I basically got to, you know, around 25 years old. I looked back over the last 9, 10 years, and there was no fruit, 0 fruit. I had so much ambition and 0 drive to do any of it. And so 25 years old, kind of looked back, and I was like, wow, there is nothing to show for it. I used to listen to Billy Graham occasionally, and he said, you know, it doesn't matter where I talk, whether it's in Soviet Union or wherever, there is a God-sized hole in us that only God can fill. And he said, we try to fill it with everything else but God. And I'm like, that was me. Drugs, alcohol, everything but God. And finally, I think nothing else worked, nothing else fulfilled me. And then that's when I responded to the Lord finally at, you know, call it 25 years old.
So what was the turning point? What flipped things for you, and how did that next part of your journey go?
Yeah. I can remember being around 25, and I would wake up in the morning, and the only way I can describe it is I had a strong desire to know God. And I accredit a lot of this to my parents praying. I mean, my mom is like that. She's like, I was praying my rosary for you, Travis. You know, it's like she's a beautiful Catholic woman.
Amen.
And she was praying, and I think she prayed me out of the darkness in a way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I was 25. I would wake up in the morning, total fog, as you know, 3 hours of sleep. And I remember feeling God calling. And it's like, well, that sounds strange. But it was just a desire to know God, to understand him, to seek him, to learn more about him. And I hadn't felt it that strongly ever. And I finally responded. I said, God, I've messed up this life thing, and I'm eager to do it your way because I want to produce something with my life. I had lots of ambition, but I didn't know how to actualize any of it. So I remember opening a Bible, and I don't think I closed it for 6 months. I opened the Bible. I started listening at the time. If you know Andy Stanley, like that's the guy for whatever reason that I just, I came on my radar and I turned to. I would sit there on my bed when I would typically be out at, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., leaving the house. And instead I would sit there in that bedroom with a notebook, and I would listen to entire sermon series from Andy Stanley, and I would just take notes. Like I couldn't get enough of it. I would devour it. And something changed, like I ended up giving my life to Christ in my bedroom at the end of one of these series. Andy Stanley said, hey, if you want to give your life to Christ, he's inviting you to do that. Just raise your hand. I'm like, Lord, I need you, and it's like, I would love for there to be some dramatic story where it's like you walk down and it's like, but it's like, I raised my hand in my bedroom and I was like, God, I need you, cool. it was that simple. And, I'd love to say everything changed then, right? But like things started falling away, friend groups, things like that. But a lot of the junk remained, especially the alcohol. That was the through line for me through so much of my life. John, I've told you this before, but I mean, I can remember going to church for like Christmas services and drinking before I would go to church because they'd be, like 5 p.m. at night. It's like, well, I'm not waiting until after church to start drinking. It's like come 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. It's like I would drink and go to church. I would drink before I went to funerals. I can remember that specifically before I went to college classes. And whenever I think back, it's like, was I an alcoholic? Like I surely felt dependent on alcohol. And I hear other people's stories and they're like, well, you didn't drink at 9 a.m. like my dad did or I did. And I'm like, well, I think there are degrees to this alcoholism thing, but I was dependent on it heavily at that time. And, one of the first things I prayed for, I can remember asking God for after I gave my life to him or rededicated my life to him was like a godly woman. Like I didn't want to go out anymore, but I wanted a companion, where I could hang out with and talk about the Lord, and I wanted a godly woman. And he honored that really fast. I don't know why God honored that fast for me. And some like friends of mine pray for like a godly wife, and it takes longer at times. For me, it was fast. And I met Tiffany, less than a year later. I can remember we met very casually and quickly, and then we hung out the week later, and she said, hey, I've had a lot of just bad relationships, and one of the first things I want you to do is watch this sermon series by Andy Stanley. He's doing one on dating and relationships in the 21st century, and if you're not going to be a godly man, can you please just respectfully not waste my time? And wow. I was like, praise God, like that is exactly what I'd been looking for. And so her and I have had challenging seasons like every marriage has. And through it all, we had this foundation of Christ, which has caused us to keep going, and persisting. And so we didn't get married for a couple more years, and the alcohol thing stayed, right? It's just, I tried to hide it at first. It created so many challenges because she knew what I was like when I was sober, and she knew what I was like when I was drinking, and I thought she had no idea, And I can remember one time specifically, whenever God finally broke it, she had gone back to Dothan to visit her family, and, she had moved here at this time, and she came back home and she said, hey, I'll be home around, 5 o'clock. And I said, okay, perfect. That gives me time to have, X amount of drinks, 2, whatever it was. And then she stayed later than she thought, and she would text me and say, hey, it's actually going to be, 6 or 7. And I couldn't stop. It's like I just couldn't stop pouring more drinks. And by the time she got home, I was just like embarrassingly like stuttering and everything else, like just couldn't keep it together. And she was like, things have to change. And long story short, God led me to a book. It's like, God, I need you to take this. Sometimes God will just take it. Other times he'll say, go to this person or go read this book. And he led me to a book that I finally read. And I have zero desire to drink alcohol anymore. I'm like, only God, only God. I can be around people who drink. I have zero desire to drink. Wow. And only God can do that.
Hey, Travis, what's the name of that book?
Yeah, it's called Control Alcohol. The author's name is Annie Grace. And it's exactly what I needed at that particular point in my life. And, man, it snapped the chains.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. I know you have a blessed family now. You have children. Talk to us a little bit about your redemption. What is God doing in your life today? Share a little bit about that with us, Travis.
Yeah. So one of the greatest things God has done in our life has been financially. And I don't know why he has used finances in our life as something he's taught us about himself. But, to back up to like when I started small group, 4 years ago, 28 years old, and went in there night one. We had a baby on the way, our first son. And, at the end of the night, they said, hey, what do you need prayer for? And I had never prayed with people like that in my life. And I said, man, we need financial prayer. Prayed with the guy there, and he said, do you tithe? And I said, no, I don't tithe. And he said, well, I'm going to come find you on Sunday, and you're going to tell me that you tithe. And I said, okay. And then through this tithing process, God taught me a lot about himself. Our income I was paying myself $30,000 a year from a business that we owned, and just putting every dollar we could in the business. And then, within the next probably 8 months, God grew our income 5X and 10X, and then it's gone up from there. And I can remember the very first time that I got a commission check from real estate. And I know I've told you this story, John, but it was $14,000. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I'd ever seen a check so big at one time. And God said, hey, I want you to tithe on it right now. And I said, well, God, you don't understand. I haven't deposited it yet. I still have this check in my hand. And he said, I want you to tithe on it now, $1,400. And I remember checking our account. We had like $1,600 in there. And I was like, God, this doesn't leave us anything till this check settles. And it wouldn't go away. And so I finally got home, got on Destiny's app and went to tithe. And I clicked the button, I remember 5 times. And on the 5th time, this takes over my field of vision. And it was Abraham carrying Isaac up the mountain. He said, Abraham, I want you to sacrifice your son. And right before he did, I'm seeing this. He says, no, Abraham, wait. I just wanted to make sure you feared the Lord. I just wanted to make sure you were obedient. I wanted to make sure you loved me more than you loved your son. And God spoke to me. He said, you don't have to tithe right now. Wait until it hits your bank account. I just wanted to make sure that you loved me more than the money that I'm bringing you. And that was 4 years ago. And since then, God has blessed us. But he started it there. He had to teach me about himself. He said, if I gave you more now, you would turn it into an idol. It would be something that you worshiped. He said, I had to teach you about me. You have to love me more than anything else. And then I'll bring you everything that you need. And so that was the beginning of God teaching us about finances and being good stewards. So he's worked wonderfully in our finances, in our business. I think a large part of my testimony is small group related. My life has been radically changed because of a group of men. They say that you're the average of the 5 people you hang around, and that is so profoundly true. I started going to that men's group 4 years ago, and now 4 years later, I was so uncomfortable night one. Didn't want to raise my hands to sing, didn't want to tell anybody the deepest, darkest secrets that I had. And God's like, no, I need you to share those things so I can bring the light in. When that door's closed, it's just dark, and I need you to just crack the door open so the light can flood in. So I shared all my junk with these men, and there was zero judgment, no judgment, which is the thing I feared most. Yeah. And as I got all this stuff out, God began just taking it away. And now there's so much freed up space in my mind because my mind so often was geared for addiction. I would stand in a group of people and look for the next time that I could drink. How long until we can leave here so I can drink again? And now there's so much freed up space in my mind, and there's just a degree of peace that is wonderful.
Yeah. Well, you brought these things to the light, and when you're in a small group, you have other men or women. If you're in a woman, you're in a woman's group, whatever. It doesn't. But you're able to bring these things to light, and when you do that, the enemy can't come against you when you bring it to light. So you were able to do that, and small groups are very important. So thank you for sharing that. Wow.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you would want to share as we come to the end of our time, to anyone listening out there that you think, I just want to share this?
Yeah, I guess I would say that I would encourage everyone to respond if God is calling, because that's something that I did not do for a long time. And, I was telling Drew before we started this, I wasted a lot of years, 10 years where I was totally lost. And I wish I wouldn't have wasted that time to some degree, because I think God could have used it. I would encourage everybody to respond. God is always speaking to us, but I think that we can push his voice down so much that it's hard to hear. So if he's speaking, respond. That's what I'd encourage people to do.
Wow. Well, this has been such a just awesome discussion, Travis. And one thing that just hit me when you were first talking that I just felt like someone needed to hear today is how your mother and your father were praying for you. And I know a lot of folks out there have children, maybe grandchildren, that are going through seasons where they're lost and they're not living for God, and they're in trouble, and I just want to encourage you to keep praying for them, and interceding for them, because we just have such great testimonies like Travis, who's just has such a blessed life now, and a beautiful family and great business, and has the joy of the Lord.
Yeah.
But he spent many years where he wasn't being obedient, and he was keeping his parents up at night, but they kept praying, and really it just shows the power of prayer.
Yes.
And those prayers worked, and I know Travis is so just so grateful for those.
Yes.
So
amen.
And I just want to also, this show, we just want to encourage anyone that's listening out there today, just to pick up a Bible, start reading the Bible. And if you don't have one, just get on your phone and download the YouVersion Bible app, and it gives you just a short verse of the day. Just start with that. Start reading the Bible. Second is to find a local church. Just wherever you are, go to church. Just take that step and go into a Christ following church. Doesn't matter the denomination. Just go. Get into a Christ-centered church, Bible-believing church. And then the last thing is get into a small group. Yes. A group of people that can hold you accountable, and get in that group, and you will see great healing and blessings in your life. Well, Travis, thank you. It's been such a great talk.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
Thank you for sharing. I know there are going to be some people that are touched by this, and we'll see everyone next week.
You've been listening to Road to Redemption, sharing powerful life testimonies, giving hope to those on their own road to redemption. If you have any comments or questions, we would love to connect with you. You can reach out to us at destinyradio.live. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week on Road to Redemption.